And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're talking about Jalen Smith, and we're talking about his season grade, along with if he can become the starter for the Chicago Bulls at the center position next season. And so, before we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so, in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. So, make sure that you hit that subscribe, you hit that like button, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the content today. And so again, we are talking about Jalen Smith. We're talking about his season grade and if he can become the starter for the Chicago Bulls next season. And so before we jump into his grade, let's start with his impact. And so, look, I think that Jalen Smith definitely showed that he could be a player that certainly he could start for the Chicago Bulls, in my opinion. I think he also showed that he could be a very good role player off of the bench. And I think that we got a chance to see just how versatile he can be on the floor, because he definitely could knock down three-point shots. I loved his athleticism and just him being a rim running big alongside of Josh Giddey and Coby White. So I think that he fit in well with them. I thought that he showed that, look, he was terrific at catching the basketball in spaces and finishing that way. Defensively, he maybe left a little bit to be desired. But for the most part, I think that I was impressed with what I saw with Jalen Smith, and I think that he's a solid young player that the Chicago Bulls can push forward with. And I do think that, look, for what AK has talked about with utilizing players that have had some success in this league and, building with those players versus going into a full rebuild, I do feel like that Jalen Smith certainly fits the timeline and what the direction is for the Chicago Bulls. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at his numbers. And so his numbers were a bit up and down for the most part. He had some good and he definitely had some bad, but let's start with the first thing here. And so his points. And so when you see his points, you see that the points have actually gone down slightly. So he went to 8.2 points this season, down from 9.9 points. And so that's the first key. Next, when you look at the assists, look, that looks like that is pretty solid. You see it's one assist there a season ago with the Pacers, one the next season. The 5.5 to 5.6 rebounds, I think that is solid anytime that you see some increase. But I think that the big increase is right here at the free throw line. So he went from 69.2% up to 80.9%. I think that's huge, especially, for a guy that is a rim runner. And then that Josh Giddey, Coby White, these guards are going to put him in position to be around the basket where he might get fouled. And so his ability to finish there, that was huge. Now, this is where it gets a bit concerning, because you see that he shot 42.4% with the Pacers. He shot 32.4% with the Bulls. And so coming into this season, one of the things that was talked about with Jalen Smith is, how for real was his three-point shooting. And so, look, 32.4, definitely not a good percentage. That was actually not his lowest in his career, but it certainly was, definitely a decline from a season ago. I'm hoping that he can pick that back up. And then when you look at the field goal percentage, he went from 59.2 with the Pacers to 46.6 here with the Chicago Bulls. So not his worst, but he definitely did decline a little bit. And I think that the big key number here too as well is that his minutes also went down a little bit. So you see that it went from 17.2 to 15 minutes a game. And so there's a lot of different factors into that. One, Jalen Smith did go through some injuries, and so you got to give him, some credit that way, for the minutes kind of going down because he did get injured. But two, it was just the rotation, right? Because we saw times where Billy Donovan didn't play him, and I wish that he would have. I wanted Billy Donovan to go to like a double big type of lineup. I don't know why Billy Donovan didn't do that, because we know that this team has lots of guards, and so he had the opportunity to do so, but Jalen Smith didn't play in those moments. And so, because of that, it comes down to an interesting thing when we're looking at his season grade, because I think based off of what, it happened during the season with the injuries and then the way that he was, kind of thrown out there, with the rotations and stuff like that. I thought that he was a solid B for me. Like, it wasn't a B minus or anything like that. I think that Jalen Smith, for the most part, controlled what he can control. I didn't like the fact that the shots and the field goal percentage kind of went down a bit, but I also think that that kind of came into just getting him out there some more. I wanted to see some more of Jalen Smith. I kept saying that really throughout the season. And so based off what I got from him, I thought he gave us good effort. He wasn't the best defender out there, but I definitely think I saw the effort. I see that he's definitely in a situation where he can get better there. And so I think that I like the fact that he fits in with what the backcourt is for the Chicago Bulls and really the future of this team with Josh Giddey, Coby White, and the way that we're building. He goes well with Modest Buzelis. And so I think that he's just got to get even more comfortable in this offense, because keep in mind, everybody was adjusting to that. And so I think that he's a guy that he's going to benefit next season, getting a little bit more acclimated to just where his shots are going to come, because I think that this team is definitely going to rely on him a bit more to stretch the floor. And I think that if Jalen Smith can really get to that point where he's stretching the floor, look, I think that the sky is the limit for him as far as getting better and definitely being a starter, which leads us to the next, part here, which is can Jalen Smith be a starter? And so, like I said before, I think that he definitely can be a starter, but it's going to come down to another aspect here with Billy Donovan and the whole trust factor, because I think that that's key number one. Billy Donovan is going to have to trust Jalen Smith some more to go out there and be a starter. Like I said, he's not the best defender. He's not necessarily knocking down, shots at a high clip, but he is shooting the free throws a lot better. We know that he's going to be a guy that can be a rim runner. He's great with the catches and stuff like that. And it's not like that his shot is broke. Like, it looks good. It just didn't go down. And I think that you're going to see some more, that you just have got to give him some opportunities and some minutes. And so key number one to him being a starter is that Billy Donovan is going to have to trust him. And next, he could also be a starter depending on what's going to happen to Zach Collins, because look, I loved Zach Collins. I love what he did, but there are the rumors out there that Zach Collins might be really on the trade market along with a guy like Kevin Huerter, because both of those guys have really, revamped their trade value. And I think that, look, the Chicago Bulls, if they're looking to move on and get some assets, then you're probably going to be wise in going ahead and moving on from Zach Collins or Kevin Huerter now. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that, but if you can get some assets back that maybe you can get some more draft picks and things like that, maybe you can get a little bit younger, maybe you do that, because you do have Jalen Smith. And I think that you still have a chance to pivot and also get another center. Now, this is if, AK decides to move on from Zach Collins, because we don't know that, but I think that there's an opportunity to do so. And so I think that that's another way in which we could see Jalen Smith start. And I'm like I said, I'm not really to the point where I think that he cannot be a starter. And I think that he would be a good mentor. And I think that even if Zach Collins and Jalen Smith are on the roster next season, I think he should get more playing time. Maybe you do rotate between those two, depending on the matchup. And I think that both of them can really bring a player in and kind of show them the ropes. And so we're talking about a guy like, Kaman Malowick, if the Chicago Bulls were to go that direction. So I'm just throwing him out there as an example. But I think that you can afford to start Jalen Smith or Zach Collins if he's still on the roster, and you can still bring a young player along. Like, they don't get in the way of that development. Like, I think that that is huge when you're talking about bringing another center in. And clearly, we still would have to move on from Vooch. And so anyway, let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking. Do you feel like that Jalen Smith can be a starter for the Chicago Bulls? Do you feel like that Zach Collins is a player that AK will move on from this summer? And then, just an added bonus, do you feel like that the Chicago Bulls will go after Kaman Malowick in the draft? And so we'll be doing some more draft shows and things like that. But let me know what you guys are thinking. Along with his season grade, do you feel like that, Jalen Smith was a B for you? Do you feel like he was lower? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.